This is the day which we have been given. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Amen. If this is your very first time here at Unity Church, you are welcome here. If you have been here for decades, you are welcome here. If you have been here somewhere in between those two things, you are welcome here. If you're here in our sanctuary, welcome. It is so good to be together. If you are joining us on our live stream, welcome. It is good to have you as part of this community. If you're coming to be spiritually nourished, know that you are welcome here. My name is the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. My pronouns are he and him. Since August 1st, I've served as Unity's senior minister. It's good to be with you this morning. I do want to extend a special welcome to those of you who are visiting for the first time. If you're new to Unity Church, please fill out one of the visitor cards that are in the back of the pews. If you are new to Unity Church online, please look up our website and contact us so that we can know who you are. Two quick announcements as we begin our time together. The first is that our congregation is joining Unitarian Universalists across the country for a UU Climate Revival today. That climate revival is sponsored by the Unitarian Universalist Association, the UU Ministry for the Earth, and the UU Service Committee. Volunteers from Unity's Act for the Earth team will help you identify your personal stake in the upcoming election and coach you on using the power of relational organizing to expand the vote. The program will run from 12:45 to 2 o'clock in the foot room. And to tide you over, I'm told yummy snacks and beverages will be provided. So please come. The other announcement is that today is the start of the annual pledge drive for Unity Church. The theme is Seeds of Change. I'll be preaching on that in a couple weeks. But in the meantime, we invite you to consider what seeds we can plant together now for a future harvest of abundance. Many of you have already received pledge materials in the mail, and we'll be sending information by email this afternoon as well. So we'll include our priorities in the rest of 2024 and 2025, including pay equity for staff, programs that call us to deeper joy and courage in the world, and dedicated staffing for our community outreach ministry teams. Imagine what we can do together. So please pledge as soon as you can. We'll be talking about that much more in October, but we're starting now. The other thing is that we do have our program Finding Yourself at Unity. If you are new or visiting or want to know more about the church, the focus this morning is on congregational care. Our Minister of Congregational Care, Laura Cowton, will be upstairs in the Gannett room in between the two services to talk about that. Having announced the announcements and done the business part of church, we'll now take a moment. Put your feet flat on the floor. Find some comfortable space in the pews. And we will enter into worship together with the pealing of our bell.
As we gather together, may we remember, when you share with me what is most important to you, that is where listening begins. When I show you that I hear you, when I say your life matters, that is where compassion begins. When I open the door to greet you, that is where hospitality begins. When I venture out to bring you shelter, that is when love begins. When I risk my comfort to ease your suffering, when I act against hatred, violence, and injustice, that is where courage begins. When we experience the full presence of each other, because of our shared humanity, because of our differences, that is where holy gratitude begins. May this space be a table that is not complete until all are welcome. May this be a space of beauty where together we create a series of miracles and where all that we share is sacred. May it be so. Please join with me in our chalice lighting words. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith, the light of truth and the warmth of love. I know that Unity-Unitarian is a space for life-transforming hospitality because I've experienced it firsthand. I first arrived at Unity on Christmas Day of 2022, a day that I wasn't expecting to be here. I thought I was going to be at home with my family in Nebraska. That winter was one of the loneliest times of my life, and I was battling depression. I wanted desperately to be at home with my family. But a blizzard came through to block any chance of travel. Craving human connection, I considered what I could do. A church wasn't a natural option for me at this point in my life. I grew up as a preacher's kid in a religion that left many scars. And as a 23-year-old, I felt I was in a spiritual no man's land, where I felt I was not Christian enough for the Christians and not humanist enough for the humanists. Honestly, I was intimidated at the thought of entering any organized faith community. I knew little about Unitarian Universalism, but with the little I did know, and the desire not to be alone that day, my curiosity drove me to the doors of Unity-Unitarian, and it's been driving me here ever since. In the openness you all have showed as members of this church, in listening to my story, in giving me a chance to learn from a myriad of others' experiences unlike my own, my faith has come alive, and my spiritual understanding has expanded beyond the narrow confines defined by fear I was brought up with, and instead redefined by compassion. In other words, the hospitality at Unity has transformed my life, and I'm grateful I took the risk to give and receive it. Hospitality changes us, and with this change comes the risk that something integral about how we know ourselves will be lost. This fear deserves to be met with curiosity and compassion. But we pursue hospitality because when we expand that curiosity and compassion to give and receive love in relationship with others, we are transformed, making our lives richer from the people we let in, allowing ourselves to grow out beyond our singular perspective and existence. I would challenge everyone in this community to consider how we may be limiting the richness of who we are, and how expanding our circle of hospitality can heal this wound. As a new member, I've known nothing but a Unity in transition. I'm one of many here, or who will arrive in the future, who need what this community can offer, and can transform this community with new and diverse perspectives. Please let us in. In a faith where living in right relationship with others is central, our norms and traditions serve best when they are defined and continually redefined to stand on the side of love and radical inclusion. When we do this, hospitality not only saves the lives of those we welcome, but in welcoming, we save our own.
Each time we gather for worship, we set aside a moment to expand the caring ministry of this congregation. Let us take that moment now. As we settle in, take a deep breath. Maybe squeeze your shoulders together, ease out some of that tension. I invite you to close your eyes if that is comfortable for you. We enter into our time of meditation, reflection, and prayer. Together, we recognize the cycle of life and death, the circle of love, compassion, and witness that is at the center of this and every sacred community. From within our community today, we are delighted to celebrate with Ruth Mackenzie and Rebecca Flood on their 40th wedding anniversary. "40 years ago today, before marriage was legal for same-sex couples, Rebecca and Ruth gathered in a small living room with a few close friends and made their vows of love and beloved partnership. They were married once again in 2009 as part of Unity's Love Bus Adventure. Who else was on the Love Bus? Ruth and Rebecca have provided our flowers today for worship in celebration with their beloved Unity Church community. We lift and send our wishes and healing prayers to Unity member Mary Kay Watson, who's having hip surgery on October 3rd, and she will have the attentive care of her partner, Debbie Weigel, as well as their Lexington Landing and Unity communities caring support. We celebrate the life and we mourn the death of George Halsey, beloved member of our Unity group at the Episcopal Homes, who died on September 21st, just a week after turning 100 years old, with his son Dan and daughter-in-law Karen at his side. George will be remembered and fondly missed by many. We know that there are those among us whose hearts are full with burdens of sorrows as well as with celebrations. Among us, there are hearts that ache with grief and loss, bodies and spirits experiencing pain, illness, and those with loved ones who are approaching their final days. There are those among us who struggle financially, concerned about the future before them, for themselves and for their families. Among us, too, are those living with addiction, with fear or loneliness, with mental health concerns, their own or a beloved family member. All are longing for a sense of belonging and stability, for inner peace. And among us, too, are those celebrating joyous occasions, anniversaries, healing, sobriety, new jobs, new babies, new loves, new paths unfolding. Our hearts expand to hold all as we bear witness to one another. I invite you at this time to speak into this holy sanctuary or into the silence of your heart the names of those whom you wish to lift into our collective embrace at this time. Will you join me in prayer? Spirit of compassion, source of life, God of many names and none, we gather today in gratitude for our many blessings, for being in community, and for the tender mercies of our lives. We lift in our prayers today those impacted by deadly storms. We mourn the loss of lives and the destruction. And we grieve the warming of the planet. And we confess, too, our own role in shaping sacred nature. May we, in the wake of these hot days and raging storms, recommit to acting for the climate, for the future. Our hearts ache with the terrible violence in the world, and we hold and embrace those who are this very day hiding in shelters and mourning the deaths of loved ones, the tattered fabric of their lives. We pray For those with the power to create peace, that they may recognize the fragile and valuable humanity of every single person and see how we are all one and we need one another to be whole. Holy Spirit of mercy, may all who seek comfort and safety find themselves in a place with no fear, with no hatred. And may all who suffer in pain or in anger be held in gentle, loving care to ease and heal their wounds. May the light of love guide all of our hearts, our minds, and our hands to create more love, more peace, more hope, and more joy in this world. Let us share a minute of silence to reflect and pray in the stillness of our hearts together. May it be so. Amen.
Unity Church is framed by statements of conscience, known as its ends statements. One of those is generously give and openly receive compassionate care in times of joy, sorrow, and transition. Our compassionate care extends beyond the walls of this church to communities with whom we share a common interest. Each week, the larger portion of our offering goes to these community partners. Today's offering recipient is Social Justice Clinical Pastoral Education, an organization providing justice-centered, liberative social spiritual care education for faith leaders who desire to expand their capacity for walking with individuals through their stories of pain, healing, and transformation. SJCPE peer groups include 4 inmates at Stillwater Corrections Facility learning to provide spiritual and pastoral care to one another. SJCPE is a progressive faith presence in an otherwise conservative, Christian-dominated environment. This collection will sponsor inmate participants. May the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts be given in gratitude this day. Let the offering now be taken.
Please rise and join in our responsive reading. Number 567. I want to be with people who submerge in the task,
who go into the fields to harvest and work in a row and pass the bags alone. Who stand in the line and haul in their places. Who are not our generals and field deserters, but move in a common rhythm, where the food must come in, or the fire be put out.
The work of the world is common as mud, botched. It smears the hands, crumbles to dust. But the thing worth doing well comes in such a shape that satisfies, clean and elegant.
Greek amphoras for wine and oil, Hopi vases that held corn are put in museums, but you know that they are made to be used.
The pitcher provides water to carry, and the person for work that is real.
The first time I attended the Unitarian Church in Baltimore, it wasn't the sermon that got my attention. It wasn't even the music, although that would come shortly. It was instead the words of welcome, spoken in stereo by the minister and worship associate. Come, come, whoever you are, whatever your age, whatever your gender, whatever your skin color, whomever you love, you are welcome here today. You are welcome at the table. At the time, I remember looking around the congregation and seeing people follow along with those words. They knew them by heart. And I wanted to know if this group of people lived up to them. It was one of my first experiences with intentional radical hospitality. This idea that the doors are open, that at UU congregations we are open to all. We welcome all. We welcome all. There's a theological grounding for this, although for me that came a bit later, like music. Our Universalist forebears declared that all are saved, all are beloved of God, all in the fullness of time reconciled. And so we should live into that promise, the Universalist argument goes, not simply staying in our churches on Sunday morning, but demonstrating that love, both in programs beyond our walls and the welcome we extend to all who come through this door, is the defining feature of our faith. In this way, we are a salve, medicine for a bruised and hurting world. We practice that radical hospitality in our lives, both in this world and in this church and in the world around us. The flaming chalice that we light every time we gather, the most recognizable symbol of Unitarian Universalism, comes out of the work of the Unitarian Service Committee in the years leading up to the Second World War. The story goes that they needed a symbol that would look religious, but not be too recognizable, to put on falsified documents, getting refugees out of Nazi-controlled areas. Martha and Waitzel Sharp, who directed much of that work, never intended the hastily sketched chalice with a tongue of flame to become an enduring symbol, much less something that we actually light on fire every Sunday morning. But the hospitality that it points to, welcoming people in, even in the most extreme, contested moments, is an example that we aspire to. It's the thing that we put in the center of our liturgical lives. In The Art of Hospitality, a practical guide for a ministry of radical welcome, Yvonne Gentile and Debbie Nixon wrote, "Radical hospitality is hospitality that goes beyond being friendly. It is welcoming guests with a warmth, openness, and authenticity that significantly exceeds expectations." This, I hope, is the hospitality that we practice at Unity. Whether we use the language of universalism, the flaming chalice, or the Kansan hospitality of Gentile and Nixon. When we say here that one of our ends, one of our big goals for our church and our community is to know each other in all our fullness and create an ever-widening circle of belonging for all people, radical hospitality is the tool that we use to do that. For me, a religious community is judged by the breadth and depth of its welcome, who it welcomes in, rather than who it excludes. So let me tell you the story of the picture on the front of your order of service this morning. A decade ago, my wife Stacy and I went on a somewhat delayed honeymoon. By the time we got married, we were both happily launched adults, so rather than a new toaster, our friends and family helped us take a trip that we couldn't have afforded on our own. 3 unscheduled weeks in Italy, unscheduled time with a rental car and all the little towns of Tuscany to explore. Now, one way of telling the resulting story is that a decade has now passed, and we're pretty sure that the statute of limitations has passed. And we can re-enter the country of Italy now. There were a lot of traffic tickets involved with the rental car and the picturesque little towns with signage in a language neither of us could read. And then further confusion as you had to pay for parking tickets through the Italian consulate in New York. We solved all this 3 years ago. The honeymoon was 10 years ago. But there was one day where, blessedly, we didn't get any tickets, but we took a day trip to the monastery of San Galgano. Now, San Galgano is a ruin. It was, at one point, perhaps one of the richest Cistercian monasteries in what is now Italy. But sometime in the 14th century, it collapsed, leaving this admittedly picturesque ruin to visitors and picnickers. This next bit is more story than history. Because what I heard and wrote down there 10 years ago doesn't quite match up with the story that I could find researching this week. But the story that I heard 10 years ago was that San Galgano had been a place of comfort and sanctuary in the surrounding area. And then, when the plague hit Tuscany in the late Middle Ages, the monks of San Galgano opened the doors of the monastery, converting it into a hospital and caring for the sick and dying until they themselves died, leaving the shell of the abbey behind. I took a picture of Stacy standing in the sanctuary. That's the picture on the order of service. And hung it in my office as a reminder of what hospitality can cost. I admired the story of the monks in a time of plague, responding to a world that asked for walls by instead inviting people in, caring for them, and living up to the tenets of their faith, even in the midst of what must have felt like the end of the world. I imagined them greeting visitors with the Latin Salve, welcome, come in, good morning, even as they were a salve, a medicine. I wondered what I would do if asked to make that choice, and hoped that I would have the courage and the faithfulness of these 14th century Cistercians living out the highest values of their faith right to the end. Of course, there's irony in that story, right? Because the picture of the monastery in San Galgano was hanging in my office a few years later when the board of the church I was serving and I decided, in the midst of a modern plague that felt like, if not the end of the world, then the end of a world, to close our building, rather than risk the deaths of staff or members to a new novel coronavirus. There was an early COVID outbreak in early 2020 centered on a church choir in the Northwest. And in the aftermath, just about every church leader I knew saw our responsibility to move online, to preserve life, in a way that would have been incomprehensible to the monks of San Galgano. Or maybe not. Because in both cases, 14th century monks, 2020 Unitarian church boards, the decision was grounded in an act of hospitality. How can we best welcome all who come to our door, even if it costs the thing that is most precious to us? In Lincoln, Nebraska, in March of 2020, we moved the Unitarian Church online because it was the most hospitable thing we knew how to do. It was a radical act, a leap into the unknown where we knew some of the tools we would use, but didn't have much practice with them. We had experimented with live streaming for all of 3 Sundays before we closed the church. In Lincoln, we thought it would be a month or 2 of doing church online before things went back to normal. A quick, sharp adjustment to how we welcomed people in order to keep things safe. I said over and over again in the year and a half, 2 years, 3 years that followed that the church is not the building, it's the people. Do you ever say that here? Yeah. It's true. And at the same time, what we had given up was real. Unity's interim minister, Kathleen Rollens, put it this way in an essay she left for me to read. The church building itself is, in a way, as much a member as a physical person. It is the container of history. Embodied in the building are decades of experiences connected to memories. It is a presence that holds the past, contains the present moment, and presumably will live on into the future. Of course, it wasn't just a sharp adjustment before things went back to normal. When I finally moved back to my office in Lincoln, over a year had passed since I had been in it. And that picture of the San Galgano monastery was still hanging on my wall. I remember looking at it, wondering if we had done the right thing. It was certainly more complicated. Unlike the monks, we had closed the doors, not thrown them open. But also, unlike the monks, the institution survived, albeit in a different way. Because we have changed in the last few years. The groups of people we welcome in and how we welcome is fundamentally different, changed. Let's talk about numbers for just a second. In 2019, the year before the pandemic, the last year we have good non-pandemic data, an average of 411 people attended worship services in person here at Unity Church each week. 411. About right, the pre-pandemic literature would say, for the number of members and the size of this particular sanctuary. Last Sunday, 297 people attended Unity Church in person. But in the week since, another 240 have watched online. Do the math on that one for a second. The week before, 354 people in person, 211 online. Merging of the waters the week before that, well, that's an embodied service. People tend to want to come and be part of the ritual. 505 people in the sanctuary that Sunday, 389 online. In fact, if you take all of 2024, there have been 38 Sundays. In 26 of them, the number of views online is actually greater than the number of people who participated here in person. Here's how Kathleen put it in that same essay she left for me. Who is the church for? The church is for all those who long to build the beloved community and see the church as one instrument of its realization. Creating worship is sacred in sacred space, engaging with children and youth, attending programs and meetings, art shows and musical performances in real time in the building should always be our first priority. Yet because of the expectation of ease, I would say expectation of access, provided by online church, this experience can no longer go unexamined. We have a whole host of unanswered questions about who we are welcoming every Sunday. It wasn't that long ago, just a few years, that churches focused their hospitality on first-time visitors, trying to figure out what configuration of physical and programmatic welcome would pull people in. Right? The entryway of a church was, and very much still is, a physical manifestation of this welcome. Opening to the street, being open to the community around us. This was before my time, but Unity Church spent a lot of time and thought and resources to make that entryway right there reflect the radical hospitality of this place. Open to the community, not cloistered with walls. Good, important work. And in 2024, I do not know of a first-time church visitor who comes through the front doors of a church without looking us up online first. In fact, if you are a first-time visitor, or someone exploring what that Unitarian Church off Summit is, welcome. We are so glad you're with us. I'm looking right at the live stream camera right now. We hope that you'll come through these doors soon. We're going to keep coming back to this question over the course of the next year. We're not going to come to a conclusion on what online church means or doesn't mean this morning. But the point here is this. There is a cost to fully living into our ends, to living into our mission in the world. There is a cost to radical hospitality. That cost is change. Whether it's the end of an institution like San Galgano, the dissolution of a marriage. Martha and Waitstill Sharp, who ran the Unitarian Service Committee in World War II, their marriage did not last very long afterwards. Or a radical shift in how we think about who is in the room on Sunday morning. That cost is worth paying, though, for two reasons. More than two reasons, but sermons have two reasons. The first is that change is inevitable. Of course it is. And so we should embrace the change that comes from living up to our highest ideals. That is the best possible way to navigate change. COVID happened in 2020. The plague happened in the 14th century. The question is not whether it will change churches or people caught up in it, but how. And the more we can lean into changing to follow our mission and ends, the better we navigate. And then the second is something that you've already heard me say plenty of times, which is that our congregations are needed in the world desperately. We don't get to give up on them. Galen Gingrich, the senior minister at All Souls Unitarian in New York, would say that every single Sunday there is someone, usually in the back of the sanctuary, in crisis and giving organized religion one last chance to help make meaning out of a really hard time. Things change. That person is probably on YouTube as much as in the back row. But our responsibility, our collective responsibility to them has not changed. So radical hospitality, big theological question. But it's often not experienced in a big, deep way. It's experienced in little things. What matters to that person? I've been that person. What matters to them is not the deep theological concept preached in a sermon, but little things. How a congregation welcomes. Debbie Nixon breaks it down into 3 practices which would have been recognizable to the 14th century monks at San Galgano. First, notice. Salve as greeting. See who is around you and welcome them in. Second, offer personal attention. Solve as medicine. Debbie talks about the 10-foot, 3-minute rule. Admittedly, this predates online church, but the rule goes like this. Every member that comes into a church has a responsibility to greet everybody within a 10-foot radius of them on Sunday morning. When you sit in the pews, you don't need to greet everybody. There's too many people to greet everybody. Greet the people within 10 feet of you. And then the 3-minute part of that is for 3 minutes before and after church, talk to somebody you don't know. 3 minutes before and after, 6 minutes total. even the deepest introverts of us can benefit from having a rule, even if you need to start that clock. And then the third rule is to follow up. Right? If part of that 3-minute conversation leads to something else, then follow up on it. Ask somebody to coffee on a Tuesday morning. Ask about their kids next time you see them. Say, how are you doing today? And then wait. Wait for a real answer. Make it weird. So we're going to try that. 10 feet, greeting each other. Look around, and for about 3 minutes, greet the people within 10 feet of you. Yeah. 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 Thanks. All right, it's been about 3 minutes, so we're going to come back. What we're doing right now is seating coffee hour. These are people that you'll walk out and talk to at coffee hour. We're going to try and come back. We're going to try and come back. Because here's the thing. Here's one more ask for you. One more ask. That was everybody in 10 feet physically. If you know somebody who mostly watches online, text them this afternoon, call them. If you're watching this online, or you're watching this on Tuesday, most of our online folks actually don't watch on Sunday morning live. They watch later in the week. So if you're watching this on Tuesday morning, take this moment, call somebody, text somebody, ask how you're doing, and then pause and make it weird. That's how we welcome each other in, by building those connections week in, week out. It's not particularly complicated, the work of hospitality, but it does change us. And it does change from year to year. What will that 10-foot, 3-minute rule look like for a church that's both online and in person? I don't know. We'll find that out together. how will we take a simple commitment to know each other in all our fullness, widening the circle, and then follow up and follow through, doing what that costs? And in doing so, how will we be transformed? Our closing hymn is number 6 in the gray hymnal, Just as Long as I Have Breath. If you would please rise in body or in spirit. So as we extinguish our chalice, remember that saying yes comes with a cost. We are transformed in ways we can expect and ways that we cannot. But we have made our commitments. We have made our vow. We will be a people of welcome. And now we see where it will lead us. May it ever be so, and amen.
What?